Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Goethe-Institut. My name is Wilfried Eckstein. I'm the director here, and I'm very happy about the attendance, and I'm very happy that so many came to the invitation of the Deutsche Welle, RIAS Commission, and the Goethe-Institut. I'm looking forward to a great program. The Goethe-Institut is one of those organizations supported by the Foreign Ministry, the State Department of Germany in a way, to do transatlantic dialogue, to support the transatlantic dialogue, which in a global world means that we don't only look at what is going on in Berlin, Munich, or in other parts of Germany and bring this to the United States, but we also look a little bit beyond to what is the role of our country, of Germany, and the United States in respect to other countries. And I think this is the common platform of our afternoon session, where we, well, can with pride look to a very successful cooperation of the Deutsche Welle, of Berlin, the RIAS Commission, in respect to the United States and in respect to other countries, supporting the dialogue, supporting an open society, and developing global civil society further on. And I think this is something of a platform of the Goethe-Institut, and this is why I'm very happy about this program, looking much forward. And without delay, I would like to ask the director of the Deutsche Welle, there's still some days left for you to do that, and also president of the RIAS Commission, to give an introduction to our afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Wettermann.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's for me an honor and a pleasure to welcome all this, or big part of our alumni, journalists from the United States of America, which have already joined the RIAS Commission Exchange Program. As he has already said, I'm still president of this bilateral, binational commission. And I'm happy that some of my commission members are with me. Especially welcome Dick Lobo. He is the executive director of the BBG, the Broadcasting Board of Governors, and also member of the RIAS Commission. And I'm also happy that I'm not staying here alone as a German part of this commission. Heinrich Kraft, he is coming from the German Foreign Ministry and is also member of the RIAS Commission. And last but not least, most of you know him, I want to welcome the Executive Director of the RIAS Berlin Commission, Rainer Hasters. And this is an applause necessary. Many thanks to the Goethe-Institut that we can do this together. It's not so many often that the RIAS Commission has meetings in Washington. We are called RIAS Berlin Commission, and every year we are distributing our awards in Berlin, and we have a close cooperation with the US Embassy there, fine, and so the Commission has decided to make an initiative also here and to bring together all our alumni in showing how important this Commission is. Even if we have not such a big outcome of the budget of the foundation, you know that the interest went down, but nevertheless the benefit out of this exchange of journalists from the States coming to Germany and vice versa is important. Don't forget that the United States have done a big job when Germany was divided, and we had the political island of West Berlin and the very famous radio in the American sector, the RIAS. The United States have made a high investment for that. And when we had the reunification in 1990, our Chancellor, it was Helmut Kohl, has agreed with George Bush, the father, that for all these efforts the US have done, we will found this foundation, this RIAS Berlin Commission, and today the commission members are 10 persons, 5 Germans and 5 Americans. I think that our common interest is, and Mr. Eckstein, whom I have to thank that we can do it together here with you, with the Goethe-Institut, what's our common responsibility? That's much more than people fly over the Atlantic looking what is going on there and or come from Europe to the States. I think in the competition of the world from today, it's necessary that we reflect what are our common values of society. What is the need of the so-called Christian development in Europe and in the United States of America. And we have to remember that the values which were elaborated out of this Christian development came up and brought the at the very end, after the French support came to the Declaration of the Human Rights. And the human rights is a base for, it's a philosophy of the founding of the United States of America, if you look back to 300 years. So, all of you, and we're together, the kind of missionaries in the global world where one thing is really globalized, and that's the media. It's much more globalized than economy. Take into account that if you have something happened, and it's around the world, via Facebook, via Twitter, via satellite, within 15 minutes. That's the difference. And the German poet Goethe was traveling from Germany down to Italy. And it took 4 weeks that the information came back, and that everything what he has made there was distributed inside Germany. Today, it's 15 minutes, as I said. And under these circumstances, it's necessary that cultural events you are doing as Goethe-Institut and media are combined. Before I'm coming here, and if you allow me that I say this, as chairman of the RIAS Commission to open this conference, I spent some days in one of my beloved college in the northern part of Iowa. All those coming not from the northern part of the States, I can tell you that yesterday morning it was snowing over there. It's the so-called Indian summer. I come from there, and there's the college which is named after a German castle. That's the Wartburg College, German castle, and many of you know that's near Eisenach in Thuringia. And it is the castle where Dr. Martinus Luther was obliged to stay a specific time, and he has translated the Bible into German language. But Dr. Martinus Luther is not only this man who has divided the Catholic Church. If you look on his items of his work, then he has brought in the center of the interest and in the obligation, in the center of the obligation of what states are doing, the individual person. To give him the individual person the information, to support him in education, but also to convince him that he has a society, this individual person has a responsibility for the society. If you like, the journalists, the colleagues from around the States being here today are interested, I want to introduce you Penny Peer, Professor Dr. Penny Peer. She is sitting beside Pete Lobo, and she is the head of the Department of Communication of the Wartburg College, and since last week we made a conference over there and have exactly discussed those items which Dr. Eckstein and myself have mentioned, and what are the aim of the cooperation of this German-American.
Thank you so much, and I am quite sure that this cinema atmosphere will stay this afternoon. You will get some very nice stories from very interesting personalities from different corners of the world, and I think we are quite up to date with what we do today. Did you get the latest news if you go to Twitter, you could find hashtag Merkelphone as being one of the favorite ones. You could find hashtag NSA, but our focus will be not the NSA follow-up of different mobile phones in the world, but the focus will be in how far new media means new freedom. And it's quite interesting because a recent study from Freedom House is telling another story. It's telling us that the freedom in the web is limited, that it is deteriorating since 1 year, perhaps more. And there are reasons enough to discuss if new media are equivalent to new freedom, or if state and authorities are counteracting already, finding not only filters on blockades, but also fine instruments of following up who is doing what in the web, and then follow him in real, or her in real life too. It's good to have you here. Please stay attentive, collect your questions, your positions. You will be invited to take the floor in, let's say, some 40-50 minutes. And I invite my panelists now to join me here. I'm feeling quite lonesome. And we have a couple of seats.
You know, take out the chair.
Yeah, perhaps I start already during the search a seat for you, Arash, and we will put the seat there, I think. Thank you so much, Mr. Eckstein. Thank you. Arash, and excuse us once more.
Oh, that's fine.
Yes, let me start with Arash Sigarchi. You are an Iranian blogger and journalist. Today you work at the VOA, but for a long while you worked in Iran, and you risked, you risked your existence and your life. You've been sentenced to 14 years of prison, and it was Shirin Ebadi as a lawyer who defended you, and by health reasons you have been released. So you spent how long in prison?
Actually, it was 3 years sentence, the final sentence I got, but after 2 years, due to my illness, I got a furlough from jail. I came out and I came to the United States.
And thanks to the colleagues from the VOA, where you now work, and you work in the Farsi service, which is quite popular, and the foreign broadcasters are offering, also Deutsche Welle, are offering Farsi programs by good reasons, and we will come back to that reasons in a second. Directly beside you is sitting Zeyno Üstün. You're working as an independent researcher and graduate student in the Department of Sociology at New School for Social Research in Munich. So your trip wasn't very far.
Yes.
It was a quick trip. And today you are a researcher in the project of the software artist Burak Arikan. He is compiling and organizing data for his artworks and creating editorial contents. And you are learning computer programming and video editing. So you are pure multimedia, digital native. Yeah? And you participated also in a quite interesting project, which is called Networks of Dispossession, a project inspired by the Gezi uprising in Turkey, and a project which takes a closer look at the capital relations behind Istanbul's urban transformation. So it is a mapping system, as far as I understood, and you will tell us the story behind it. During the Gezi Park protests, Üstün was an active member of the media and crisis management team of Taksim Solidarity. So there was a sort of management behind, yeah? So you tried to organize it.
Not really, I wouldn't say organize it, but we were kind of in close proximity with the issues and problems of the field, this area.
We will come back on that. And Arash, as my colleague sitting directly beside me, Sherian Al-Hayek, you both are laureates of the BOPs. And the BOPs are one of my most favorite projects, being editor-in-chief at Deutsche Welle. Deutsche Welle is quite interested in having a good network cooperation with netizens like you are, and we invented some 10 years ago a Bloggers Award. Today we called it a Web Award project, and the Bobs each year they find the best voices raised in citizens journalism. And in 2012 you both have been the laureates, and we are happy to have you here and to show also that Deutsche Welle is really in a good cooperation with you. It's good to have you here. But I don't forget to introduce you to the people sitting here. Sherian Al-Hayek is a Syrian blogger living in Chicago, Illinois, but now in Istanbul, more or less. Yeah. She has written for newspapers and websites in various Arab countries for years, and since 2008 she has run her own blog, Charcoals. Al-Hayek is actively working in various projects for the Syrian revolution. One of them is called Syria Inside. What is it exactly?
It's actually, that was a movie. It's made by a German group. It's a movie that focuses on exactly what's going on in Syria from the Syrian perspective. The director, his name is John, but I forgot his name. Do I ever tell him if you meet him? He wanted to bring more the inside of Syria, the jokes, the parts that no one really understands. If like the inside jokes in Syria bring it more up to the world to see that the Syrians view their things in their way, and it's not always like what we think they're doing is what they're really doing. And so the director died. Not the German one, but the Syrian one died while he was in Syria. He was filming he got shelled. So from there, the project took another route to more like get more into details of how journalists, lose their lives through like documenting something. So
Quite interesting. We will deep in that a little later. But you've been also an initiator of a Facebook campaign called Free Razan, and this is a colleague, a Syrian blogger, Razan Ghazawi, whom you defended and tried to release him. You've been successful?
It's a she. She's actually, she's been released. I don't know how much the Facebook, well, the first time it really did, but the second time she was detained twice. The second time she was detained with a group of people, and I don't know if the Facebook page was for her first detention, and it really went wild. They went like I don't know, a lot of people were like, people that have never media and people were actually protesting in some other cities calling for her freedom. And she's released. She's now working on similar projects regarding freedom.
So perhaps a direct impact of a Facebook campaign, perhaps not. Nobody could really
well, the
evaluate,
second one,
but, it is interesting, and we will afterwards discuss a little bit how the current situation is in Syria for bloggers and citizen journalists. This is the
structural response of the German Foreign Ministry to the new challenges. And we asked us the same questions as many in the US. Why do they hate us? Why this polarization between the Islamic world and the Western world? And that's why the office was created at the time.
Mm-hmm. But you have been in many regions in the world, Asia, because you've been situated in Tokyo, but you have been in Washington too from 2001 to 2004. And you are a senior strategic analyst and deputy head of the policy planning staff from 2004 to 2006. So you're, let's say, you're the agenda maker of the German foreign policy.
Well, I try to.
Take that. I think you have a lot of questions yourselves, but I have the benefit to put them first. Mr. Sigarchi, if you look at Iran today, in Europe, many people are hoping that Mr. Rouhani will make a difference. Are you seeing a little bit of hope that also citizen journalism and, let's say, the openness of society will be better in 1 or 2 years?
This hopeless from Europe depends on your experience 10 years ago when Mr. Rouhani was high-ranking negotiator with you about Iran nuclear program. But when we are talking about journalism and freedom in Iran, we should go a little more deeper in Iran and what's going on in recent years. As we already know in Iran after Green Movement in 2009, many things changed. And we know a lot of pressure on Iran, foreign pressure by sanctions. This is most important things, I think. It was changing Iran supreme leader mind to bring something new. Many people in Iran use this expression, God gave a hug to Mr. Rouhani. Rouhani was in a good place to become a president when Mr. Hashemi disqualified and other guys. I don't want to tell disappointed you, but there is some signs give us a little more caution and a little more concern about what's going on in Iran. In recent months, I want to tell you, in outside of Iran, we can see a lot of changing. For example, new foreign minister, Mr. Javad Zarif, is a good guy. Everybody knows about his Twitter account, about his Facebook account. But what about inside Iran? What about pressure on many activists inside Iran?
It's interesting. Facebook couldn't be used inside Iran.
That's the point. For example, Mr. Zarif has a Facebook account. Every day he's putting his status, but almost 20 million people in Iran who has a Facebook account, they don't have access. Why?
So he is only doing that for outside people?
Maybe.
Not very convincing. Normally Facebook is a social network. Huh?
The point is, I found a traditional pattern for this kind of action by Iranian regime. If you give me 2 minutes, I can tell you something. For example, when radio came in Iran, some religious and extremists said they deny that. They deny TV, they deny radio, they deny cinema, they deny internet. The second step was they talked about that and they ignored that. Another step they got was they was thinking about this new technology. I want to give you a clear example. Mr. Khamenei 4 years ago mentioned Twitter as an enemy, as a tool of enemy. He mentioned Facebook is a part of soft war to changing in Iran. But right now, Mr. Khamenei has a Facebook account with 60,000 fans. Mr. Khamenei has a Twitter account too. What changed? Right now, Facebook is not a kind of tools for soft war.
Perhaps they use it themselves as being a tool of soft war.
They were uninformed about that.
Okay. We come back to Iran, but I think what you said, it is an instrument of the already. Is it true that in Turkey people have been arrested because they Twittered?
Yes, during Gezi, I think it was early June again, after this statement, in Izmir and Adana, I think over 60 people were arrested due to their tweets. But then it was justified by saying that they were trying to organize a crime, a criminal activity which involves hurting other people and hurting the peace in the cities, in the centers of the cities, also insulting, this is not really interfering to the protests itself, but using another article in favor of repressing the, voice being, raised by the protesters in the social platforms.
Okay, Global Voices told us that 370 bloggers worldwide are currently threatened or in custody. How is the situation?
There's reason to be skeptical. I think that these activists over here are just a wonderful example of how you can use social media effectively to bring awareness to issues, but they're not necessarily going to change in and of themselves existing power structures, and particularly since a lot of these social media are corporately owned, you are now, as we've discovered in the US, subject to what that corporation decides to do with your data and your information. So I think that there are a lot of ways to subvert, existing power structures can subvert activism using social media. But I think one of the most important things that social media has done over the past 5 years or so, is to bring awareness to citizens who didn't know that other people felt the way they did. To begin to realize that there's this phenomenon in social psychology called pluralistic ignorance, where we basically think we're the only ones that think the way that we do, or maybe there's only a few other people that think the way that we do. And what social media did with We Are All Khalid Saeed and movements like that demonstrated we're actually...
Which stands at the beginning of the Egypt movement, yeah.
Precisely. It demonstrates we are a unit. There are other people like me out there. And it generates... It's not simply something that's happening via social media. It's about changing the perceptions of what the people around you think, and that sort of generating this drive to make change.
Coming back to that, but you've heard about this new report of Freedom House. They released it just a few weeks ago, and they also found that activists are becoming more effective at raising awareness of emerging threats. That's what you told us now. But there are new, let's say, autocratic tendencies of controlling and surveying the net. While blocking and filtering, there's one quote from the report. While blocking and filtering remain the preferred methods of censorship in many countries, governments are increasingly looking at who is saying what online and finding ways to punish them. Would you say this is a worldwide trend?
Absolutely. I mean, you would think in the U.S. would be one of the places we wouldn't be seeing this, and what the Edward Snowden leaks have shown us, the NSA leaks, has demonstrated that really no one is safe. If you want to say safe, is not having your information being accessed by governments. So I think that it's kind of a constant game of cat and mouse, that activists and social movements need to be somewhat ahead of where governments are, but governments, of course, are going to, or existing power structures are going to constantly attempt to maintain that power. So it's a way of using, it's technology being used as a method for maintaining or acquiring power. And I think that it's, in the very early years of the internet, we had a lot of theorists talking about how this is going to create this new virtual public sphere. It will create a place where people can talk about politics and democracy and issues in ways that they never could before. And I think what we're beginning to discover is that that may be the case, but there are a lot of negative consequences that coincide with that.
It is a little bit funny that Edward Snowden is now in the very uncensored society of Russia and is very near to a Kremlin, a news agency, which is quite autocratic. But would you say that this Snowden's news dropping, he now revealed the Merkel phone thing, is this news dropping something useful? Are you appreciating it?
It was an extremely smart and strategic way to release this information. You know, when WikiLeaks first started releasing information, the biggest files that they released in 2010, the diplomatic cables, there wasn't really a standard for how to release information like this. At this point, basically, we have to acknowledge that only more of these documents are going to be revealed. And I think what's been happening to the people who are leaking these documents is they're becoming more strategic in how they share them. So Edward Snowden, you know, obtained contact with a journalist and a filmmaker through encrypting and decrypting messages. They met in Hong Kong. They were able to do this interview, which explained why he did what he did, who he was. He was not anonymous. And then ever since then, in June and July, we've seen more and more trickles of information. So what this does from a political communication perspective is keep that story on the agenda. In the very early days of Edward Snowden coverage in the US was very much about, this was sort of a treacherous thing that he's done, that he's not someone to be trusted. And when you begin to see that this more and more information come to light and existing public officials acknowledging that these things are true, it begins to have a little bit more hold. And even tomorrow we're seeing a protest and a rally here in DC surrounding the NSA surveillance to sort of protest that.
There is a sort of anarchic moment in this developing control in the web. would you say that Snowden or the WikiLeaks thing is something which revealed connections and important aspects of the whole story, Mr. Kraft?
Yeah, sure. It certainly definitely has changed the way, for example, our people are working. If you have to expect that people will read it, you haven't even thought of, so you will be much more cautious, and will be will have an influence on how you write things, what you write, and to whom you address things. May I?
Perhaps this is not always an advantage to be more cautious, huh? And the citizens, journalists, they are quite uncautious, and they really, during the revolutions in Egypt or in Tunisia, that had a certain effect. But coming back to these different regions which you analyzed since years, what is your balance? Did we underestimate the societies? Did we overestimate perhaps the revolutionary benefits?
Well, maybe there is another aspect to the story, how much effect social media have had in Arab countries and probably even in other parts of the world as well. They have had huge social effects. Look, most of these countries are very hierarchical. They are paternalistic. They are top down. It's parents. It's the professors. It's the teachers. It's the priests who actually are the authoritarian authoritative people. But what has one of the effects of the social media has changed this, that the 10-year-olds or even younger people have shown to their parents, have shown to their professors, have shown to their teachers how this works. And so it really has put a part of the social setup upside down, and it has empowered them. And for the first time, many of them have experienced, well, I have power as a 10-year-old vis-à-vis my parents, vis-à-vis my professors.
Are you permitting me to transfer this aspect to Mr. Sigarchi? Because the Green Revolution is quite a while ago already. And if I look at Egypt, but Iran, people are now again a little bit more cautious, and they are not so active as during the Green Revolution. So would you agree with what Mr.
A little bit. The point is the Iranian using Facebook in 2009 as okay, I'm in center of the world. I can change everything. I can tell everybody what's going on in Tehran because I am. But they changed. They put the emotional sensitivity and emotional action away. In recent election, 2012, they changed this pattern. They saw, okay, we have a Iran supreme leader. He has a lot of power. We cannot change him. We cannot put all option as a president or supreme leader. But we can do what we want between these candidates. There is a person, his name is Saeed Jalili, is so close to supreme leader, but we can choose another one who is close to reformist. So they did. I think they changed their mind. They put away emotional actions in social networks.
And putting up what Mr. Kraft mentioned, how courageous are people still, or are they arranging with the system?
Courage. This is, I didn't exactly get the point, but I'm talking about Iranians change their mind to change their options, what they have.
So they arrange with the system, in a sense. Yes. Yeah? Sorry for this interrupting you, but
my point is that people who have experienced that they are powerful This will change their way dealing with the society. Will give them more incentives to be engaged in the future. So I think we haven't seen most effect of this real revolution, because it's the very young ones who see this empowerment, and they haven't reached powerful positions yet. The moment they will, I think the whole region will change. So the Arab Spring is not over. It has just begun, nothing more.
If you look at the region and if you look at the foreign policy, is Germany, we have this definition of public diplomacy, which is based also on communication as foreign broadcasters like Deutsche Welle, but also perhaps on the netizens, on the citizens journalists. Are you cooperating with them directly?
Well, directly, yes, of course, via our Facebook accounts. All embassies, or most, not all of them yet, have. But what we are doing is to reach out to bloggers, to reach out to people active in this field. For example, at the end of 2010, we organized a blogger seminar in Cairo, and of course, all were on Tahrir Square when it started in January. This wasn't necessarily our intention, but given the fact that all these countries are very young countries, in the sense that 50% of the population is younger than 25 or 26, that's the future. And being in charge of public diplomacy, you have to reach out to these people, because you have to catch them in a very young age in order to be more effective in what your goals are. To portray Germany. That's my job. That's the job of my office, to portray Germany as we want to be seen, as an open society, as a democratic society, etc.
I must take the opportunity, or use the opportunity that you are here, just to put one question to you, which is in the mind of everybody here. How did you discuss in the Foreign Office the NSA gate now? The NSA gate. How do you discuss it in the Foreign Office?
Well,
The political stuff.
it's well, this is, of course, we are seeing both sides. It's, of course, totally unacceptable, but we also see the negative effects on transatlantic relations, on German-American relations. And we are, of course, seeing this as a problem, because we have an interest, we have a national interest in good transatlantic relations, because we feel that something, what we will need, what we need today, what we will need in the future. And so we are willing to join those in the US to jointly overcome these irritations.
And to have perhaps a little bit more confidence in
Well,
traditional partners.
yes, trust has been lost, sure, and it has to be rebuilt, no doubt about that.
Yeah. I think there will be a delegation, a European delegation in the US next week. That's what I heard today. Oh, sorry. Coming back to Turkey, there have been wonderful hashtags, hashtag Occupy Gezi, or hashtag Diren Gezi, what means resistance Gezi, and so on. Some very Turkish definitions too. How did they work? So did these hashtags really have a mobilizing dynamic?
Yeah, I think they did.
Yeah. So could you measure it, or is it something which is where you speculate that it is the case?
There are some researches that has been done about the influence of the hashtags and how dispersed they were during the Gezi resistance, not only in Turkey but around the whole globe, because unlike the Egyptian uprising during Gezi, people also most of the people who tweeted were in Turkey, but almost as much people were tweeting from abroad. So, and these hashtags were shown to be really effective in both foreign and domestic borders.
For a long time, journalists, professional journalists, have been the watchdog of what happened. So how was the performance of your private and state media during the protests? And in how far did it perhaps change due to the effect that many, many citizens share opinions or share their perspectives?
I think like in terms of social movements in all these regions, I think there's one common thing that mainstream media failed miserably about covering the protests. And it was like 28th of May, and there were only 60 people in Gezi. I was there, and people were tweeting and people putting the news like, you know, out there through the social media. And there were mainstream reporters. Many of them are my friends, and they were trying to write about it. They were trying to, like, you know, publish what they'd been, you know, gathering about the prior Gezi and during Gezi, their whole file. But it was impossible for them because it was being blocked by the editors. So they remained there. They were there, like they observed the whole resistance, but they were not writing about it in the newspapers. And in the TV channels, you know it already, the whole penguin story, like from day one till now, still, there's no like decent coverage of what's like been going on in Gezi, or about like, you know, urban transformation, or about all those other policies that AKP government has been enforcing.
So you would resume that without social media and citizen journalism, there would be no free published opinion?
Of course, because no other, like, you know, conventional media was covering the protests. So there was no, not even information, no, like police or the use of tear gas, or in many critical issues, like the foreign public opinion was pushing things really further, but nothing really helped the protesters or the situation in Turkey.
Yeah, as you mentioned, change should come from within. This is the point of view I
But
think you share.
sometimes, yeah, foreign pressure is going to be helpful. Something like Iran we had in changing, you know, atmosphere of political in Iran.
If you look at Iran today, how did bloggers and netizens overcome the many filter systems your regime is
The big
using?
problem is filtering. The big problem. We have our, actually right now 40 million users we have in Iran. They are using internet, almost 60% of population. But the number we have is 5 million website is filtered. The approach government says is, okay, we are filtering pornography, but 10% of these 5 million are political and blogs and something else. This is exactly what they are attacked to freedom expression in Iran. Because 10 years ago, almost 8 years ago, we had almost 1 million bloggers in Iran. But right now, there are less than 100,000. Why? Because of filtering.
And how do you proceed technically to overcome this filter mechanism? So is there a sort of subversive writing, or letting the keywords apart, or how? What could one do?
They are doing people. You are talking about people. They use VPN, filter, anti-filter.
So the users. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it's very hard. I told one of my colleagues here, one day when Rouhani was coming to US, I don't know why, maybe because of the test, they put the filter out from Facebook. In one day, I got 4,000 likes on my fan page from Iran. Just one day. It wasn't actually one day. It was, you know, most of that was the night in Iran. But so they did, and we got the adventure.
And there is an official invention. This is called the halal web.
They didn't run that yet, but they try to manipulate the websites with just filtering.
Okay. Coming back to Syria, the situation there is quite opaque in a sense. Yeah, it's a closed information room, even in the web. I think we find many small issues, But how could we verify internet sources from Syria? Do you have any recommendations? What is
Yeah, you
true
would
and
have.
what is propaganda?
I would say, and there is at some point, you only have to rely on people you know. Your network is the only way for you to actually know what sort of information is coming up, and what's really true and what's not. I would say, personally, I've heard stories. I don't know if I could share a lot of them, but I've heard stories where um, a lot of the coverage was like the media coverage. Some media sources would reach out for activists, and they would tell them, if you only cover this part, and if you cover this much, we'll broadcast what you cover. And it happened in my town in Homs, where when it was the center of everything for almost a year. And there are some people who actually did some videos, and they uploaded them on YouTube, telling some stories about how Al Jazeera, for example. I try not to mention names, but
It's okay.
yeah,
It's a
it's
competitor.
yeah, but like Al Jazeera would not even, like, up to this day, barely any civil movement they would cover. Like, if they would, at some point, they actually told the activists, the citizen journalists, if it does not involve, if no like shooting is involved, no fightings, no blood, don't send it to me. I'm not gonna even broadcast it, because where's the point? It's not even interesting for people anymore. It's old news. Like, a group of people walking down the street chanting for freedom is old news now. It's like you have to come up with, the bloody stuff, and this is what we broadcast. And I think this has a lot to do, like, with why the situation in Syria went this far. It's, yeah, of course, the Gulf had like a huge role to play in, even the, like, sometimes they sent cameras, not weapons, but even those, like, you only were able to cover this much with them, because if you cover more, we're gonna cut it off and we're gonna take it, and you're not gonna have anything. We're not gonna broadcast you. So it's, yeah, it's been manipulated, most of it.
Yeah, and it is very, very escalative in a sense. We see a lot of violence and a lot of blood in the web. Is this communication, even the netizens' communication, is it contributing to violence and escalative conflict? Do you see that? Yeah, we have this nice definition of it.
And even people who don't really follow an agenda are like falling within the hole that everyone has to put all what they have. And the violence in Syria is actually, it's as bad as we see in these videos. And sometimes, when the extremists have like one of those videos, they're really like bloody and crazy, and it blows your mind. And then where the Syrian regime media comes into play, and they're very smart in doing this, where they take what they want the whole world to see, and then they play their game in actually making a story behind it, and it works. And it works because when as I was telling you earlier, like 1,400 people died in one day, and then the next day they knew how to put it in the media for the Assad to have like protests going all over the world supporting him, just because the U.S. said it's going to intervene. It's I'm sorry, but I can't even answer one question in within one
it is too
sentence.
complex,
Because,
and I have a very political question, which sounds quite easy, but I think it's quite difficult to answer. How could the war be stopped? Yeah, but
I think the whole world is. I think the whole world is asking the
and
same
now
question.
it's you to answer.
Yeah, now it's my turn to answer. Well, I have, of course, just like anyone else, we have hopes and we have like dreams of ways. First thing, Assad has to go. If he's in power, he is the person who actually got us this far. And as long as he is in power, we're not going to be able to move forward in any way to, like, even these extremists who are like, most of them are not even Syrians. We can't even fight them now because we're fighting him. We can't even kick them out because we have nothing else. Like, now in the liberated parts, they come in and they say they're the government, because we can't even, like, we don't even have the time, or even if we have the time, we don't even, like, in some small towns, they elected their own government. People just gathered and elected their own government a week after the extremists came by, and they're like, they put the government in jail, and now they're the government. So Assad has to go, and this is where, you could actually start planning on like a further, as long as he's in power, the war is going to keep going.
Okay. Mr. Kraft, with you, I'm a little bit on the traces of contradictions in our Western policy, if you permit. We are in cooperation on panels since years, so we are a little bit accustomed to this part of the game. But Western states are criticized for their treatment of the web. Western companies are selling spyware to Middle Eastern dictatorships. Some laws in the West, even in Germany, are considered as limiting the internet freedom. Shouldn't the democratic states step up and support stronger, a little bit louder, strictly?
I think a freer net would definitely be in our longer term interest. And that's always the question between short-term interests and longer-term interests. They are not always going parallel. So you might have a short-term interest in the stabilization of a situation now, though this might contradict your longer-term vision for democratization, for more pluralistic, more inclusive society. And these are the difficult dilemmas, not only foreign policy, but also foreign policy has to deal with. But you have to come up with decisions. And well, as long as you are open to accept criticism and the will to change your policy, I think you are at least not running into a dead end, but that you might find the way to get the around the corner and not running in front of a wall.
Lindsay, is the West too timid, or not? Yeah, should we do something in common or have something in common when we are dealing with freedom of the web?
I'm not sure I can speak to that directly, but I can say that this conversation has gotten me thinking about, how U.S. media in covering conflicts and wars has sort of influenced how other countries have covered conflicts and wars. And I think the point is good, that it's accurate, that unless it's bloody and it's has a lot of conflict, it's not going to make it into the news. So I think that our news industries need to do a better job of covering issues like the ones we're talking about now, that aren't necessarily filled with dramatic and conflictual coverage. But I think that that the West does have an invested interest in making the internet more free, but that what we're seeing, I guess what I'm saying is what we're seeing with the NSA and with other attacks on Americans' privacy, I'm not seeing that they're going to shift their focus so dramatically to another country when we're dealing with so much here.
Yeah. And I have a question concerning you three, and perhaps also Lindsay. I don't know who wants to comment, but sometimes it's my impression that these societies are dealing in a very internal way. Is there any exchange, for example, between Syria and Turkey, or between the Iran revolution and perhaps others who learned the best practice from them? So do you see the societies in exchange?
Well, I have to say that Syrian revolution, this far, it's got on the blacklist with other revolutions. So we try to, and usually it gets to the end where they, like, a lot of, like, even in Turkey and in Spain, and I've been to protests, and you get into an argument with people because you're like, they talk to you like, hey, your revolution is it's not good, it's not a revolution, and it doesn't hold the like values or whatever. It's like, yeah, before you even like get any further, you're blocked. But before the Syrian revolution goes so deep, it was like, I'm gonna mention like a quick story about in Syria. The very first protest that took the street in Syria in 2011 was not in March, and it wasn't against the actual regime, not right away. And the first one was to support the Tunisian, and then there was another one to support the Egyptian, and then there was another one to support the Libyans. And a lot of the chants that were said that day, they were like kind of an indirect way of actually telling the regime that we're defending the freedom of the Tunisians, the Egyptians, the Libyans, the Yemen, and like all the places where the revolutions were going, because it's our revolution too. And this is the new freedom that we're talking about. It's like your freedom is my freedom because we're all in it together. And then it got deeper down to like the point where today, if we sit with our friends who used to be a friend from like an activist from Tunisia or Egypt, we get into an argument because
So you are interconnecting.
we are, but not always in a good way.
Yeah. Would you agree with that? Because I think I would say with Iran, the immigration is quite important. And I think the Farsi community is globally, yes, but they remains as such, yeah?
Iranians usually give advice to other people because of many Iranians are scary about the word revelation. Remember 35 years ago, I was listening to Sharon about, she said, okay, we have revolutionary and extremists. Right now we are all against the Assad. This dialogue was very familiar for me, what we have heard from past when revolutionary Iran, they were against the Shah. Nationalists, lefts, and extremists all together against the king, they were. But after revolution, Khomeini got the power. So it's a little scary for Iranian people. When 2009 happened in movement, Green Movement, many encouraged people to come to the street to change, regime change and everything they want, but they scare about the blood. After events in Syria, they said, okay, almost 70 people died in that movement in Iran. They said, okay, more than 100,000 people in Syria, but nothing changed. So they are very careful, and maybe they are looking for peaceful changing in Iran, like right now we are watching.
Anything to add from your side, from here?
I did want to add on to the comment about, how do you know where these videos are coming from that people are uploading to YouTube, et cetera. There have been several organizations who are, one is called Storyful, where they actually do look at the geolocation. They confirm through various sources that they have in different countries whether this video is real or not. So I think we need to encourage more organizations like that to
social media news agency.
Right.
It's commercial, I think.
Yeah. And then I think, what was the other thing I was going to say?
I hope it wasn't me, but
it was you.
Okay, but I could. I could organize some minutes of.
I remember now. There are also some organizations that are going in and training these citizen journalists on how to put landmarks in the shot and how to take the video so that it can be easily verified. So I think that citizen journalists are doing a better job of that, at least from my perspective, that they have more tools at their disposal to make sure that those videos can be verified, and hopefully there are fewer false videos spreading.
Would you say that professional media is still a serious part of the agenda setter?
Absolutely. I mean, what's happened here is that it takes violence, it takes thousands or hundreds of thousands of people being killed for it to make it to American news. And not to say that America is the center of the world, but to make it in American news, I tell my students, unless you have some kind of relationship with the U.S. or it's a huge, huge conflict, it's just not going to be discussed. It's not going to be in the media. And so therefore, there are millions of people who simply won't know about it. So when Syria came into the American media, for a lot of Americans, this was, what is happening? Where did this come from? So it encourages a dialogue. It encourages people who aren't aware of these things to talk about them. But I think that it's scary that as we move forward, we're seeing that it takes more and more and more to get in traditional media. to get covered by traditional media. It takes more conflict, more death. But I think that traditional media are the ones who are providing the analysis, the interpretation of what citizen journalists and bloggers are doing. There's a certain legitimacy associated with traditional journalists that that I don't think will ever go away. I think that people trust journalists to, you know, maybe they do bring some bias or some perspective to the story, but you know that they've done the research and that they've explored all the various sources, and they're not someone that comes from a particularly ideological perspective.
Thank you for the support. It was non-commercial. Now it's up to you. I think we mentioned and touched a lot of different issues. It has been a very broad horizon of ideas. So I hope that there are still remaining some questions. Please raise your hand, and my colleague Monica will come with a mic. Welches Mikro nehmen Sie denn? Nein? Das ist ja sehr selbstlos. Ja, genau. Ich nehme Ihnen das mal ab, gebe Ihnen aber wieder. You present yourself.
Oh, I'm Charles Self from the University of Oklahoma, retired. And I was early on involved with the Rias Berlin Commission, so we've done a lot of work together. I'd be interested in, particularly from this side of the room, a discussion of the relationship of social media to the professional international media. There's been some research that indicates that even without professional media or international media, even in a controlled situation such as you had in Egypt, the Egyptian revolution would have happened because it was in the streets, it was in the coffee houses, it was a lot of places. But it was the social media who brought it to the attention of the international media and actually helped set the agenda of the international media coverage in what was happening in Egypt. I wonder if the experience is similar in your countries.
Actually, I wanted, in Tunisia it was, like you said, but in Egypt was the only one that the call was on a Facebook event. The call to protest was a Facebook event, and it was a lot of people actually intended to attend before, but then when it was wild in the streets, it got more and more people to actually go down to the streets. But I would agree with your point that it's the social media is a tool at the end of the day, but it's like mentioned earlier, it's the tool that makes us all feel like I'm not alone. We probably all agree on this is wrong, it shouldn't happen, and then you figure that it's not only in your neighborhood, but it's in the other city too, and then you look at it from the bigger picture that it's in the country next to you, and then the one next to that country, and it's like the whole world shared your point of view about some things, and this is what makes you feel strong. This is what pushes you down to walk down the street calling, and that someone else would defend you if something happens to you. You're not alone, type of thing. So yeah, I don't know if anybody else has.
I would say in relation to international media versus local media, professional media, what we had, there's a famous picture going around online, international CNN broadcasting online, live from Taksim Square, and in Turkish CNN, they're broadcasting a penguin, documentary, and and it really happened that way. Reuters was there all the time. If you're not in Gezi, the only either you have these live streamers that uses their cell phones and other tools to broadcast or live from the protests, or Reuters or DHA. They were also there as international broadcasters, and it really they got the news from the social media. They were drawn to it. They came and they covered the news. A lot of also German, French, English, and American press also arrived, I think in the middle of the occupation of the Gezi. So it really these social media and their mentions, especially because we tried doing that. We mentioned in Twitter, we mentioned the CNN, BBC, all those big outlets we knew that would be interested in it, showing the footage that we
took, or the photographs and everything, and it worked. They arrived to the area and they caused the protests.
Yeah, I am agree with them because of many international broadcasters being brought actually new people, new professional people to broadcasting these kind of news, especially when, for example, as an Iranian, I am listening to CNN when they are naming wrong. I was disappointed. What's going on? But right now, we can see something very helpful. And on the other hand, I want to bridge to, for example, foreign international broadcasting like Voice of America, BBC Persian, even Deutsche Welle. When they have attention to, for example, my country, Iranian news, many people use that. There is a poll. It was set by Iran National TV station. It says most people use BBC Persian, Voice of America, and other foreign international broadcaster instead of Iran national TV station. They don't have trust to their country's media. So that's very helpful.
Hi, I'm okay. I'm Dave Rabinowitz. I have a question for the bloggers. How did you get started? How did you choose which websites to blog on? How did you get the word out? How did you build following, or did it just happen?
It's a long story. Actually, I was chief editor in a newspaper. Intelligence service asked me, don't publish this news, that news, another news. I was looking for a way in 2001 actually. What can I do? Can I run a website? No, it's so expensive. I asked my friends, they said, hey, new technology is web blogging. What's blogging? I searched and understood what is it. I started every single piece I wasn't able to put on my newspaper as an editor, I put on my blog. For 6 months, it worked very well. I was in north of Iran, south of Caspian Sea. I put news about fire, about protests, about every single thing. I wasn't able to my newspaper. After 6 months, they called me. What's going on with your email? Huh? Email? I have an email. Okay. No, you are publishing news. They didn't know even what's different between email and blog.
Who's they?
Intelligence service. And then they asked me to do not. I try so-so. Sometimes I publish my news. I know my wife hesitates to if I use this example, but I want to use that. She knows why. When I was in Iran for 5 years, I put only 200 posts on my blog. When I came to US in recent 5 years, what do you think? I put 4,000 posts on my blog. 4,000. This is freedom. I have a respect for that. So the good news about activity in journalism field and in blogger is you can find new way. Some governments like Iran government, they are behind you. They just follow your steps. So you are in front. We are in front. They are behind.
For myself, it's more of like a. I moved to Chicago in 2003, and I wanted to keep up with what's going on in my hometown. It was in Homs in Syria, so there was a forum that I just started blogging. I mean, not blogging, but it was like you just being online and kind of follow up and read the jokes and everything. And then it was a religious one. It started as a religious one, and then it got more intense and deep into the political side when a group of people were talking about political issues, and the owner decided to open up that door for it, and then 6 people got detained they were the first. I think they're the first people to get detained in Syria after an online activism kind of thing. It wasn't really an activism to start with. It was like writing poems and stories and critical ideas. about the government. And then when they got detained, I was very shocked. And as you were saying, I was here in the States, and I felt that, yeah, you have the right to speak up. And I was 15 when I moved here, so it was kind of common sense. And then I got more into the freedom of expression in Syria, and why is it not there? Why is it not present? You have to call for their freedom. And when the forum was not giving me any more like audience to speak up to, we all agreed on, yeah, this is what it is, we have to go on with it. I moved to a personal blog, and a friend also just advised me to, you go do your blog, and that's how it started.
How many people are following your blog?
Currently, I think it's went down the past few months because of the situation in Syria. You're speechless sometimes. You don't really know exactly what to say because there's multiple. You can't write like a 500 word anymore. You have to write like 2,000 to explain really what you. So I don't really know as of today, but there was times where I'd get like around 800 visitors a day. So that's the average.
Thank you. Further questions?
My name is Lucy Hempstead. I am worked with Rias in the past, and I think it was 1999 that I did the exchange, but that taught me so much about the value of sharing ideas, even pre the days we had social media available. But now I work at a university in Evansville, Indiana. It's very small, but we have 54 countries represented, including we have 11 Syrian students this year, and we just had a group return from Turkey. And I'm thinking, as I have sat down and talked with those students to tell their stories, I work with the media now from that side of things. How might our students better engage, telling stories?
Interests involved, and we think it's in the German, in the European interest, if neighboring countries are democratizing, because we think that on the basis of our own experiences, that in the medium and long term, countries will be more stable when they turn into democracies. So it's also in our national interest, in our European interest, that these countries go into that direction. And then, of course, it's also interest-led, that we support activities we think is helping these countries to move into that direction. And for that reason, we are partnering with institutions, with individuals who think this way. And
I think this is an interesting discussion, but I think you're in the situation that you could compare, and out of your contributions to the discussion, I feel very strongly that you are comparing. This is freedom, you said, Arash.
Can I add this?
And coming back to that, I think part of our foreign policy and part of what Deutsche Welle is doing in cooperating with so many international colleagues, they are always telling me, going back to Mali, going back to Rwanda, where you couldn't work as a journalist, going back to anywhere else. They told me it was good to have this professional experience. I put something back. We are not forcing them to do a special thing, but they have, for example, skills or the possibility to compare or to push something, which is important. For example, freedom of opinion. And I think this is something, you called it moral necessity. This is, but it's a value. And But Arash,
as a student in American University in graduate education, I recently did research about a relation between Iran and US. The point was interesting for me. Adventure of relation between Iran and US in all recent years was more than disadventure. 8 years we have experience with Ahmadinejad, former president of Iran. If he was a democratic president, what was adventure and benefits for Iranian and American? A lot. But we missed that. Everybody missed that. So I think democratization, you mentioned, is very helpful to other countries to become more valuable for themselves, first of all, and then for others. It's very helpful.
Yeah, this is a big issue we wouldn't now turn to, yeah, because it needs some other 90 minutes to discuss that. But I saw some hands. Mr. Eckstein, yeah, the host.
I would like to ask the representative from Iran and from Syria about how is the perception, or what do you know about the perception in your home countries? I mean, you're blogging from the United States now. Your history is, of course, going back to Iran, but you are now in the US. And I could imagine that there is a different perception from people that receive your blogs, being in Iran, going through all the treadmill, all the awful time, and receiving a blog that from somebody in the US. I wonder, is there a difference? And in a way, the same question to you. So what do you feel about being in exile in that way and reporting back or helping the communication back in Syria?
Go ahead.
All right.
Because I want to use some examples. Go ahead.
Personally, this is actually why I made a move to Turkey, because I wanted to be more involved and more into the. You walk down the street in Turkey and you see like a bunch of Syrians walking down the street as well. And on the other hand, this is why I was mentioning earlier that I'm trying to, at very few months, I don't blog as much, because what I do, I write articles more like critical or like deeper thinking of an event that's going on, or like the American Convention or other subjects but I don't blog about situations unless it's stories from people of my network. Because other than this, as we've been talking, a lot of stuff that comes out of Syria today, if it's right, it's missing something, and if it's wrong, it's also not very helpful for me to actually help the rumors around. So I try to, well, right now in Syria, generally speaking, you don't have much to speak of if you don't have a story. There's this website right now, it's called Syria Untold, and it's new, and I write there sometimes trying to write stories of people in Syria who cannot write their own stories, kind of like what we were talking earlier, people who has a story to put out. Other than this, it's I tried my best at the beginning, and now it's got too wild to actually be part of this whole picture. I moved to Istanbul hoping I'd be able to bring some.
Actually, we are not talking about message or very unvaluable data. We are talking about information. With this social network and social media, we are able to use these to understand what's going on. Physically, I'm not in Iran. I know everybody knows that. But I know something from Iran every day. I have a conversation. Many people inside Iran, they don't know. I can give you a lot of examples about this, because we had this experience recent 5 years. Physically, I'm not there, but social media give me this opportunity to live with them, to understand what's going on in Iran. For example, I'm a member of one private page in Facebook. The page includes 600 Iranian journalists from whole country. Every day we have put some stuff, some news, some articles, everything we can review. So I understand what's going on there. And I receive sometimes news faster than many people inside Iran.
Thank you so much. And I think we raised now your interest in going into perhaps bilateral dialogues with the panelists. I'm sure that nobody of us will miss the coffee break, and you too. So there must be some coffee outside, and we meet upstairs. Upstairs. Thank you, Mr. Eckstein. We meet here again at 4:30, and just to encourage you to come back, in the second panel, we will look on the practical effects on professional journalism, in how far are social media influencing what we do. I think this is quite interesting. So come back, join us here. Thank you for your interest.